Shalom and welcome to Nazarene Israel. My name is Norman Willis, and this is our Midrash for Parasha Bemidbar for 5784. And the context is the two different types of armies. And most people say, what are you talking about? Two different types of armies? We're talking the Salvation Army and the regular army? What are we talking about here? No, there's two different kinds of armies in Scripture, and we're going to talk about them and show how Yeshua fits into the picture here. But before we get there, I need to touch on some things that we talked about last week in Parasha Behukotai. I just mentioned in passing that there is such a thing as Khazar theory, and that we believe Khazar theory is true, but that doesn't mean that Judah is not Judah, okay? And I want to clarify this because there's certain topics you touch on, and people are just ready to kill or sue or throw you in a pit or do whatever they do. So we just want to talk about this just real briefly, but this is from the Anti-Defamation League. They have a long article about untangling false claims about Ashkenazi Jews, Khazars, and Israel. And there's in the first paragraph, we don't cover it here, but they say that basically anti-Semitic people will use Khazar theory to say that Jews are not Jews. Okay, we do not say that Jews are not Jews. We believe Khazar theory has a basis in fact. We'll talk about that just a little bit, but we're not denying Judah his Jewishness. And we're going to talk about the reasons for that. And we think it's particularly hypocritical for Ephraimites. Yeah, I don't look Middle Eastern, give me a break. That we think it's particularly egregious of Ephraimites to make claims that Judah can't be Judah because of Khazar theory. You say, okay, so Khazar theory, it's like, well, what are you talking about? Khazar theory. All right. Just before we begin here, just to make a disclaimer, we do glean from all sources. So we glean from all four horses, and then we have to put things in the correct order. Now, we do not subscribe to the beliefs of a gentleman by the name of Henry Makow. Makow is Catholic, or he advocates for Catholicism. However, this is an article from henrymakow.com, and he talks about the Ukraine war, Chabad's strategy for Slavic genocide. And we talked before about how Chabad is effectively of the line of Zera. And it's not Peretz that's the problem. Zera is the one that's causing all the problems. Okay, so we're going to dive into this article. And this is I'll just put it up here in larger print for those of you on small phones, but just quoting from the article. So he quotes the Chabad leader, Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson, saying Slavs and Russians, you can destroy them. They can be destroyed, but they can never be conquered. Okay, so that's why their seed line, the Slavic, the Russian seed line, has to be liquidated. Okay, but first you're going to have a sharp reduction in their numbers, and they won't completely, it goes on to read, they won't completely liquidate them. They're just going to reduce them and put them on reservations, this kind of a thing, in the far north. So that's the Chabad plan, or at least from Rebbe Schneerson's speech, no matter whether you're Chabad or Ephraimite or of the line of Peretz or who you are. It's a good article. Just to be clear, we accept Henry Makow's research. We do not accept his recommendations or his conclusions. He's pro-Esav. He's pro-Catholic. We don't go there. But so to continue on, Rebbe Schneerson says, Ukraine, if he gets his way, if he gets his worldview, he says, the Ukrainians would think that they are fighting against the expansionist Russia and struggling for their independence. They will think that they have finally gained their freedom, while the reality is that they have become fully subdued by us. He says, and the same will be thought by the Russians, as though they defend their national interests to return their lands, which they believe were illegally taken away from them, and so on. And it goes on, and there's really a lot to this. To me, it makes perfect sense. There's some other sources here. This is a website from Christians for Truth. They have an article, Did Chabad Jews Orchestrate the Ukraine War to Establish Their Third Khazaria Kingdom? Good article. Recommend reading that one. And then they also have, there's a website called Veterans Today. Just to back up here real quick. So Christians for Truth, they do understand two-house theory. We don't know who they are. They stay anonymous, this kind of a thing. That's, all right, we'll just leave it there. So then we have a website, Veterans Today, and they're also pro-Esav, they're pro-Ishmael, they're pro-Islam, basically. They're pro-Palestinian cause. So again, we'll take their research, but we're gonna not take their conclusions, or we'll consider their conclusions and draw something that's in keeping with the Genesis 35 alliance. But they have an article, What Role Does Judaism Play in the Ukraine Conflict? And if you'll notice here in the picture, basically what they're saying, so there was I don't remember the exact year, but way back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, you had what was called the Khazar Empire, and it's the only Jewish kingship that has ever existed outside of Israel. So, and if you take the Khazar Empire and you overlay it over top of the Ukraine, it's basically the same area. And so there's this theory that goes that, well, the Khazars, who became the Ashkenaz, originally came from the Ukraine, and that's why they want the Ukraine. And there's really a lot to this, because if you think about it, the present president of Ukraine is openly Jewish. He says he wants to make Ukraine into a big Israel. Okay, well, this is exactly in keeping with what the line of Zerah does. So, Judah is the kingship tribe. Judah's going to do what Judah does, and it's not our purpose to criticize Brother Judah. We just want Brother Judah to recognize the need to go back to the Tanakh. So it's because Judah, Zerah, and Levi presently follow the Talmud that we have so many problems. Joseph has so many problems today. That's why we have the Birchat Haminim. That's why they're cursing us, asking for our deaths 18 times each week, 3 times every weekday. Anyway, those are good articles. We don't like their conclusions, but I don't have time to reproduce those articles, and the research is all good. So there they are. But here we have, so just to see how Zerah works. So here you have Russian Prime Minister or President, I guess, Putin. And who is he listening to? Okay, who's in charge in this picture? Okay, so he's taking instructions from Russian Chief Chabad Rabbi Beryl Lazar. Okay, so who's in charge in this picture right here? So the hidden hand, this is how Zerah works. The Chabad is particularly involved in the line of Zerah. That's what they do. So good information. I just wanted to clarify that so that, well, there's more. I just wanted to clarify our position. So we will look into other parties' research, but we don't take their conclusions. You know what I'm saying? So we'll look into what Christians will say, but if it's anything Trinitarian, we back out right there. But we still like the research. Okay, so enough said. But let's come to some scriptural reasons why we don't reject them as being Jewish. So we come to Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 12, starting in verse 48. And we saw this already back in Parasha Bo. And it says, when a stranger dwells with you and wants to keep the Pesach to Yahweh, let all of his males be circumcised, then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as a native of the land. Okay, he's following the covenant. He's doing the things it takes. He's paying his tithes. He's making all the assemblies. He's getting circumcised. He's doing all the things. He's becoming a native of the land. This is the same principle. It didn't start with Acts chapter 15. This is an ancient principle. It's always been right there in the Torah. However, he says, but no uncircumcised person shall eat it. So if you're going to get involved in the covenant and do all the things that Yahweh says to do, yeah, he'll take you. Praise Yah. It doesn't matter your color. It doesn't matter anything. You're nothing. We say that as Ephraimites. It doesn't matter who you are. You can still graft in. Well, it's the same for Judah, and it's hypocritical to suggest otherwise. So verse 49, Yahweh says, you're going to have one Torah, both for the native born and for the stranger who dwells among you, because either you're entering into my covenant and you're doing the things I say to do, or you're not. So if you're entering into my covenant and you do all that I say to do, then you're my people. Or if you think you're entering into my covenant and you don't do all that I say to do, you're not my people. I don't know you because you didn't submit. We don't have a good relationship. So this is something Ephraim needs to wake up and clue into. Judah gets involved. They just need to realize that it's Elohim's covenant they need to enter into. And it's actually a lot harder than man's covenant. So, but this is an ancient principle, and here we go. This is an ancient principle, and this is from, we see it many times in the Tanakh. So from Ruth chapter 1 and verse 16, Ruth grafted in when she said, "Entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall become my people, and your Elohim will be my Elohim." Okay, she's grafting in right here. You're the Israelite people. You have the Elohim of Israel. I'm in. I'm in. Okay, she grafted in, and she's in the line of David, who is in the line of Yeshua. So what are we going to do? We're going to say that Ruth, we're going to call her a Moabitess and not an Israelite, even though she's in the line of David and in the line of Yeshua. Or we're going to say King David was secretly a Moabite, or Yeshua was secretly a Moabite, because they have Moabite in the line. It doesn't work like that. It does not compute. Okay, that doesn't work. So what I'm saying is equal weights and measures. Okay, there's one Torah for both houses, and we all need to submit to it because we all have to go before him in the judgment. So if we know what's good for us, and if we value our eternal spiritual lives, then we need to get with his program. We need to enter into his program. Judah's already entering into a program. They need to enter into Elohim's program. Ephraim, it reads all about the program. Ephraim just needs to start entering into the program, putting Elohim on the throne, and we wash his feet for a change. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I just want to clarify our position on the Chabad and the Ukraine war and the works of Zerah and this kind of thing. It goes way, way deep, but we need to love our brother Judah throughout. Okay, so moving on, we're coming to talk about the two different types of armies and Yeshua. Okay, we're going to start in the Torah. It's Bemidbar, or Numbers, starting in chapter 1. And before we begin, we just need to talk about the four main roles in Israel. Give me one moment. And we could talk about the three main roles, and then plus the fourth role of the anointed, not the appointed judge, but the anointed judge. And that's also accurate, but we like to call it the four main roles. So first you have the king. Who is the king? The king is the top of the alpha male dominance hierarchy. He's the big dog. He's the 800-pound gorilla in the natural. Okay, and hopefully he's dedicated to Elohim, like King David was, and the good kings were. So your king, he leads your temporal army, your material world army, your guns, your fighter jets, your missiles, all that kind of thing. Okay, and he's head of the host. Okay, well, what is the host? Okay, Ishmael still knows what a host is. So if you're from Ishmael, welcome. You know what a host is. Ishmael does things that neither Judah nor Joseph presently do in the Torah today. Okay, well, Judah also knows what a host is. Some people think they're trying to get rid of the host in Gaza. So we'll talk about that some other time. Joseph, by and large, has forgotten completely what a host is. Joseph doesn't understand the concept of a host. Well, I should say among Judah, the mixed multitude, the heir of Rav, they don't know what a host is. They don't understand that concept. But the host basically is what supports and supplies the field army, so to speak. It's your host that raises the money that then goes, it's the host that develops the weapon systems and the technology that then become used to win the war. So that's a host. So your kingship, the head of your temporal army, he's going to be in charge of your lawyers, your guns, and your money. Okay, so he's going to serve in his court. He's also going to serve on the battlefield, or at least in ancient times he would. Okay, and he doesn't necessarily like prophets. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now, your priest doesn't necessarily like priests either, but your priest, and this is something, this just is lost on Joseph. And Joseph, Ephraim, if you're out there, if you're listening, brother, okay, get this. Okay, get this. Okay, a priest serves in the spiritual army, and we'll give examples from the Torah in just a moment. Okay, when you say spiritual army, Like, what are we talking about here? Spiritual army. Okay, what is that? Joseph doesn't know. Ephraim doesn't know. Okay, Ephraim's in this concept of, I'm sending texts on Facebook. I'm part of the priesthood. Okay, we all have a role. So every man has a role as the priest of his household. And so it's an order of kings and priests, but there's more. Okay, there's a need for an organized priesthood. Okay, so the priest serves in the spiritual army. And you say spiritual army, it's like, what are we talking about? Okay, so there's altars are involved. People need to come to get altered. There's rituals involved. There's prayers. They also have a very important role teaching the people the difference between what is clean and what is unclean. And they are called to render some judgments, particularly in regard to what is clean and unclean, because that's their main job. They're to maintain effectively the portable set-apart bistro for Elohim, okay? And we're going to see what's involved in that. And they're also to teach the people what Elohim says, not the Talmud, not the Messianic movement mythology, okay, but what Elohim says, okay? Then you have the prophet. Prophets have a tough job. Okay, their job, because the priests and the kings don't necessarily like them. Okay, all of your great mighty men of the Tanakh and the renewed covenant as well. Okay, if you're a prophet, people hate you. They don't like you. They want to kill you. Okay, that's the role of a prophet. You take your life in your hands and you transmit Yahweh's words to the people. There's two different ways to do that. One is foretelling. That's like what everyone thinks of prophecy, like, thus saith Yahweh, this will happen, Okay, and then you also have forth-telling, which is where you rebuke your brother, where you tell forth, you bring forth the things of Yahweh. This might be construed as that at some point. Then you have the anointed judge, and the anointed, not the appointed judge, but the anointed judge. It's a special combination of all three giftings, and it's used for special circumstances, particularly when there's transition involved. This is one of these kids don't try this at home situations. Okay, so when you have a major transition, I want to say this in a respectful way. It's a big job being a priest. It's a big job being a Levite. It's especially a big job being a high priest. Even when the system is already established, it's a special job being a high priest. But to be a high priest or to be a king or to be a prophet in a time of transition, okay, you need both the prophetic gift and at least one of the other gifts, but typically all three. Okay, so we're talking your heavy hitters of Scripture. So your anointed judge has a combination of all three giftings that's used for special circumstances. So you have examples in the Tanakh. You have Moshe, you have Joshua, you have Shemuel, you have King David. And then you also have, for the renewed covenant, you have the Shaliachim, or the apostles, and Yeshua is our chief apostle in the heavens. So Yeshua was effectively an anointed judge. He was the chief apostle. He was the high priest of the Melchizedekian order, or the order of Melchizedek, and he is presently serving as our high priest in the heavenly realms for the order of Melchizedek. Okay, so he's got a special role, takes a special heavy hitter for that. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to get into a lot in this parasha. I hope people are ready for some meat. Hope you're looking to masticate. Now you got Ramban. We're going to cover this. This crops up as a brilliant statement. Comes up every week. So Ramban, Nachmanides, on Genesis or Bereshit 12 and verse 6. And he says, let's just drop to the bottom, whatever has happened to the patriarchs is a sign for the children, meaning history repeats itself. Okay, well, how does this all apply? Okay, well, we saw before back in Parasha Vayeshev, then this is when Joseph, who was a prophet, was hated. Why? Because he's a prophet. What do prophets do that gets them to be so hated? They speak the truth in love. Doesn't matter how much love you speak it in, people still going to hate you. Because why? Because we have to submit to Elohim. If you're going to hold us accountable and you're going to hold our feet to the fire, then you're going to require that we all submit first to Elohim in his spirit and then one to another in the spirit, like it was supposed to be originally back in the Garden of Eden, like it's supposed to have been ever since the Pesach. or the first Pesach, the first Exodus from Egypt. But people don't like that. People don't want to do that because we don't want to give up our sovereignty. We don't want to give up our control. We don't want to let go and let Elohim. And we especially don't want to let go and let Elohim if we have to pay tithes, if we have to help contribute to his kingdom, if we have to treat him like an Elohim. Oh, imagine that. Yahweh is our Elohim. Oh, what does that mean? What does it mean to have an Elohim? Well, okay, Parasha Vayeshev, Bereshit, or Genesis 37, starting verse 19. And they said to one another, look, this dreamer, this prophet is coming. Verse 20, come therefore, now let us kill him and cast him into some pit. There's layers of prophetic significance to this. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. Then we will see what becomes of his prophetic dreams, his prophecies and his dreams. Take a look. So they want to kill him. He's a prophet. They want to cast him into some pit. Turns out there was no water in the pit, water being symbolic of the Spirit. That's a prophetic foreshadowing of how the house of Ephraim would go off and then would eventually become brought into the pit of the Catholic system, the Catholic church system, the mystery Babylonian Roman, Greco-Roman church system. There's no water in that pit. And they'll say, oh, some wild beast has devoured him. Now we only have Noahides. Now it's only Judah and only Noahide slaves. So you can see these just layers of meaning that go on in this thing. Okay, we come in now to Parasha Bo, which we already saw. Shemot, or Exodus chapter 12 and verse 12. Here's something we're going to see again. Yahweh says, for I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night and will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and I will also strike all the false Elohim of Egypt, and I will execute judgment on them. I am Yahweh, and you're not. So you need to do what I say if you want to enter into my program, if you want to be protected. Okay, he's going to hold us accountable. So the prophet is really your friend. It's just no one treats him like that. Okay, also Parasha Bo, Exodus Shemot 13, starting in verse 1, then Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, consecrate to me all the firstborn. Whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast, it is mine. So Yahweh struck all the firstborn of Egypt, but this is the cost. Yahweh says, I'm springing you from Egypt, but this is the cost. All the firstborn, they need to serve me. Okay, I've got a job for them to do. I want a priesthood. I want in those days, a tabernacle. I want a portable bistro. I want a place to meet with you. I want you to show me that you love me enough to make me that portable bistro, or in the case of a temple, a permanent bistro, a set apart place for us to gather, where I can gather with the people who love me enough to do the things I say, even though it's against what their flesh wants, even though it's against the evil inclination. That's the whole point. If you care enough to follow me instead of your evil inclination, when you don't really have to in this life, we got something to work with. Okay, but I want you to do everything. I want you to join my program. He's a commanding general. We're enrolling in his army. We have to do the things he says. Okay, so what does he want from the nation? There's another concept lost on Ephraim. It says, oh my. Judah understands the need to respond as a nation. Judah understands the need to respond as a family. I'm not saying they do it well. You can't do it well without Yeshua. It's not possible. That's why everything is such a mess. But at least Judah understands the need to respond as a nation, because they're still a nation. They have physical threats. They need to respond as a nation. That's why they have a country. Ephraim says, we don't need to respond as a nation. That's why we don't have a country, because we're not willing to enter in. We're not willing to do the things it takes to field the two types of armies, a physical army and a spiritual army. We don't want to be a host. We don't want to host anything. Hosting things costs money. It costs time. It costs effort. It costs energy. We don't like that. Joseph, he worked hard. Ephraim, we're spoiled, rotten brats. We don't want to do anything. We just want to sit there. We want Elohim to bring everything to us. And as long as we're here, that's kind of why Christianity is so popular. So I'd have to look it up, but there's about 20 million Jews in the world. There's about 2.2 billion Christians. I'd have to do the math, but I think that's about something like 100 to 1 or more than 100 to 1. It's like, why are there so many Christians? It's because in the mainstream version of Christianity, it's the broadest, easiest road possible. So it's all for me. You just go to him when you want something. You ask him for what you want. Gimme, 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 amen. That's it. You're done, right? Dear Father Yahweh, thank you for giving me those things I asked for. Here's another list of things I'd like to ask for. That's how we treat Yahweh. We chump Yahweh. We don't have a relationship with him. We go to him when we want something. We're like spoiled, rotten children. Okay, Judaism's different. Judaism, we'll talk about this more. We've already talked about it some. To think that the Talmud is an honest interpretation of the Tanakh when you never even read the Tanakh, or if you do read the Tanakh, you make sure you listen to how the rabbis tell you to interpret it. Okay, that's not right. Okay, but at least Judah is willing to get involved. At least Judah understands the need to respond as a people. Okay, Ephraim. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about being a people and not being a people, and how to respond as a family, or how to respond as a tribe, or how to respond as a house. We have to do those things. We have to respond as a stick before we can become part of a kingdom. Okay, before we can please Yeshua, we've got to start doing all the things Yeshua says to do, which are the same as the things his Father says to do, or at least are the same principles and the same precepts adapted for life in the dispersion. Okay, well, let's see the house of Judah. So Shemot, or Exodus 32 and verse 27, we saw this back in Parasha Kitisa. And he said to them, thus says Yahweh Elohim of Israel, let every man put his sword on his side. So Moshe said to them, let every man put his sword on his side and go in and out from entrance to entrance throughout the camp, and let every man kill his brother. Okay, so spirit over flesh. Let every man kill his companion that worshiped the golden calf, and let every man kill his neighbor that worshiped the golden calf. Now, please don't misunderstand what I'm going to say here, okay? But every tribe has their strengths and every tribe has their weaknesses, and we all need to learn to get along as a family if we're going to make Genesis 35 and verse 11 a reality, if we're going to make Ezekiel 37 a reality, and if we're going to be able to help Ishmael come in throughout the millennium. This is important stuff. So verse 28, so the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moshe, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. And you could say, well, Levi's always up for killing. Anytime you're going to kill a prophet or kill the people, Levi's up for it. And maybe there's something to that, but take a look at what Levi did. Levi put Elohim first. You say, well, yeah, it's good practice for the Birchat Haminim. It's good practice for cursing Joseph later on. It's like, okay, take a look at the characteristic. Levi put Elohim first. So if anyone has any dreams or aspirations of joining the Levitical order in the day after the ingathering, of joining the Levitical order, the renewed Levitical order, notice the characteristics. That this pleased Yahweh, that they put the spirit over the flesh. Yeshua says something like that about hating your father and mother and sister and brother and forsaking all so you can serve the spirit first. Seek first the kingdom. Okay, Levi took a step in that direction. And go ahead and make the jokes because they're funny and they apply. But look out, because Joseph, because Ephraim, brothers, we really need to learn to respond as a people. Judah is stellar compared to Ephraim in the responding as a people department. We'll talk about this in this parasha. So it's also in Kitisa, the verse 29, then Moshe said, now to Levi, consecrate yourselves today to Yahweh. Set yourselves apart to Yahweh, that he may bestow on you a blessing this day. For every man has opposed his flesh and blood. Every man has opposed his son and his brother. Every man has placed Yahweh first over men, over genetics. Okay, Levi's forgot that in the meantime, but look at what they did. It's like muscle memory. If you had it, you can get it back again. So Levi, you can turn away from that nasty Talmud. You can go back to Tanakh. Elohim will receive you. He will love you for it. He will bless you for it. He will reward you for it. Go back to the Tanakh. Okay, so now, with all that Nachmanides background, let's come now to Bemidbar, or Numbers 1 and verse 1. So Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of meeting, on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they'd come out of the land of Egypt. So our forefathers had been gone for 13 months. Okay, Judah loves that number, 13. Okay, verse 2, it says, now, take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel, by their families, by their fathers' houses, according to the number of the names. Okay, every male individually, from 20 years old and above, here's the key, all who are able to go to war in Israel. You and Aharon shall number them by their armies. Okay, so what we have a census of how big are our armies. Okay, well, this keeps going. So drop down to verse 20. And just for example, now the children of Reuven, Israel's oldest son, their genealogies by their families, by their father's house, according to the number of names, every male individually, from 20 years old and above, all who were able to go to war. Are we sensing a pattern here? Okay. Of those who were able to go to war, of the tribe of Reuven, they numbered 46,500. Give me one moment. Drop down to verse 45. Once again, we're talking here about, the point is, we're talking about the temporal army. We're talking about the physical flesh and blood strength of Israel. And the point is, that's not what you want to place your faith in. Okay, it's important, it's real world, but that's not what you want to put your faith in. Okay, so verse 46, all who were numbered of Israel, all 12 tribes except Levi, were 603,550. But the Levites were not numbered among those who swung a sword, among the physical army. They were not numbered by their father's tribe as soldiers, as troops, for Yahweh had spoken to Moshe, saying, verse 49, only the tribe of Levi you shall not number, because they're going to be my quality control. Okay, you're not going to take a census of them among the children of Israel, because I'm going to use them to hold you accountable. Okay, verse 50, rather what you're going to do, you need to appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of the testimony and over all its furnishings and over all the things that belong to it and all the things that go on there, and they shall carry the tabernacle and all of its furnishings, and they shall attend to it. There's a big job there. He wants a physical bistro. He wants a physical Garden of Eden. They shall attend to it, and they shall camp around the tabernacle to protect it. Okay, they were to set themselves apart from the rest of the tribes that they might receive this blessing, because they were willing to oppose flesh and blood. They were willing to oppose even their sons and their brothers. Okay, they put their sons and their brothers first. And people say, what if my family doesn't come along? It's like, that's hard. That's really, really hard. And you have responsibilities to your family as long as your family still lives. You need to pray for your family as long as they still live. But emotionally, okay, where your heart goes, that's a different question. Okay, so the tribe of Levi was to attend to the things of Yahweh. They were to camp around the tabernacle and provide physical security for the tabernacle. Verse 51, and when the tabernacle is to go forward, when we're supposed to move the portable restaurant, Yahweh wants to change the scenery, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle is to be set up, the Levites shall set it up. Now, here's something Ephraim just needs to get. The outsider who comes near shall be put to death. And it's like, well, wow, it just says terrible. Like, why would you put an outsider to death for trying to come in the tabernacle in the wrong kind of a place? Okay, it's because Yahweh wants the respect. Say, well, what do you mean? What do you mean an outsider? What does an outsider mean? Okay, so we look this word up because we love doing that. So Strong's Hebrew Concordance 2114, the word is zur. It's a primitive root, and it means if you're not from there. So you come to town and you have to turn aside to find lodging, or you have to turn aside to find food because you don't have a home there. You're a stranger. In other words, you're a foreigner. You're strange. You're profane because you're not yet set apart. Okay, now, we need to be clear about this. The heart condition is what's important here. Okay, Ruth, she said, I'm in. Wherever you go, I go. Your Elohim, my Elohim. I'm in. Bang, she's a convert. She's as good as an Israelite, basically. So this is something else. Okay, if you're a zur, if you're a stranger, okay, you're a foreigner, you're an outsider, you're not set apart, you don't know the Torah. Okay, now specifically active participle to commit adultery, which idolatry is spiritual adultery. Okay, you're coming from another place, dude. Right? Someone who's coming from another place, someone who doesn't have the same theology, someone who doesn't keep Yeshua's halacha, is like Jude verse 3 says, even though we're both saved, yet it's still needful for us to keep Yeshua's original halacha. That's how we become not strangers to one another. And in the body of Messiah, in Christendom as a whole, unbelievable how much fragmentation there is. And why is that? Is because everyone thinks they're following the words of Yeshua, and they're not actually following the words of Yeshua. And if everyone would actually follow the words of Yeshua and enter into his covenant and stay connected in the vine and not quench the spirit and do the things he says to do, it would heal. It would unify the body of Yeshua. That's what we're talking about here. Not to come from some other place, not to come from some Esavite place, not to come from some Greco-Roman Babylonian democratic place. Okay, don't be a stranger like that. Don't be a mystery Babylonian and think you're cool, because it doesn't work. Now, what are we talking about? So Ephesians chapter 2, starting in verse 19. Shaliach Shaul, he writes, now therefore, you are no longer strangers and foreigners. Okay, you're no longer outsiders. You're no longer people who have not entered into the covenant completely. You're no longer people who say, a tithe or in my time, it's just not really worth it. Okay, you're no longer that way. You made the decision, you sat down, you counted the cost, you realize, you know what? When I get to the day of judgment, if I'm not actually doing the thing, he's going to say, why didn't you actually do the thing? And I'm going to be toast. So you took the time on Shabbat, this Shabbat, on Yom Kippur, whatever you do, praying in the middle of the night, whatever you do. And you start to realize, you know what? If this is Elohim, if there is an Elohim, okay, he's my maker. He doesn't want me living some parasitic, fake sacrificial existence. He wants me actually entering into his covenant, just like he says. So am I going to do that? Because if I don't do that, nothing's going to work right for me, either in this life or in the next. I'm going to get thrown into the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. What do I want for me and my children? What do I want for my family? Okay, so hopefully we have that conversation. And then we decide, you know what? We need to enter into Yeshua's program. And that's why we are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the set apart ones and with the members of the household of Elohim. Okay, we're talking about house, tabernacle of David, living temple. Okay, but there's only one, and there's all kinds of fake, phony substitutes. There's all kinds of substitutes. Verse 20, did Elohim indeed say you have to do what Yeshua said? Oh my. Verse 20, having been built on the foundation of apostles and prophets. It's also called the foundation of apostles and elders. That's what we see in Acts 15. That's what we see in Acts 21, is the foundation of apostles and prophets, with Yeshua Messiah himself being the chief cornerstone. What does that mean? That means that we all need to walk the same Jude 3 walk. We all need to walk Yeshua's original halakha, entering in, submitting first to his spirit and then one to another in the spirit in order to establish that original single family environment that's going to care for his world during the millennium and not get thrown into the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay, so there's an accountability aspect here. That's why we see Yeshua Mashiach Nagid. That's why we see him as quality control. That's a prophetic role. Okay, so he's the chief apostle. He's the chief cornerstone. If it doesn't agree with him, if it doesn't agree with his doctrine, if it doesn't walk like he walked, if it doesn't quack like the chief duck, forgive me for saying so, I'm just trying to drive the point home. You know what I'm saying? The duck test. Okay? If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and swims like a duck, it might be a duck. Okay, but if it doesn't walk like a duck, it doesn't swim like a duck, and doesn't quack like a duck, it's probably not a duck. So if its walk doesn't look like Yeshua's walk, it's probably not Yeshua's walk. Okay, just saying. Verse 21, in whom the whole building being fitted together, key word, together, grows into a set apart temple in Yahweh, a living temple, a living tabernacle of David. Okay. And that's when we all do all the things he says to do. That's when because there's a purpose to this. And this is what most Ephraim, they have no clue. They have no clue. They understand what a physical army is. They get that. But as far as a spiritual army, they can't, it's like, what? They can't, it's like a bunch of muscle heads, right? We get the physical army part. Yeah, but we don't get the spiritual army part. Okay. Judah gets the spiritual army part. Okay. And guess why they're so powerful? Guess why they have so much influence? It's because, at least in their own way, they're putting Yahweh first. Not saying they're getting it right. Not saying they don't need to quit cursing Joseph and asking for our deaths 3 times each weekday. I'm just saying, if you discount the value of corporate prayer, you're making a colossal mistake. You're making a fatal mistake, basically. Okay, let's move on. So we'll come back to Bemidbar, or Numbers, chapter 1 and verse 52. Now it says, the children of Israel shall pitch their tents, everyone by their own camp. Okay, so each tribe will be situated by itself. And so, like nationally, there's enough people in a nation, it makes sense to group, or language group. We go by language groups. Okay, it makes sense to group them together because they have a common language. Okay, well, they had the same language, so they went by camps, went by tribes. So everyone by his own standard, according to their armies. Verse 53 says, but the Levites shall camp around the tabernacle of the testimony, that there may be no wrath on the congregation of the children of Israel. And the Levites shall keep the charge of the tabernacle of the testimony. Brothers, what does that mean, to keep the charge of the tabernacle of the testimony? Does it mean perhaps there's something to do? Does it mean that there's something that needs to be attended to? Okay, he says, and the Levites shall keep charge of the tabernacle of the testimony. It means there's something to do. One moment. So then in Bemidbar chapter 2 and verse 3, we're talking about the physical armies. So on the east side, toward the rising of the sun, those of the standard of the forces with Judah shall camp according to their armies. With Nachshon, the son of Aminadab, shall be the leader of the children of Judah. And his physical, temporal, swing a sword army was numbered at 74,600. And it goes on like this. But then in Numbers chapter 3, starting in verse 5, Yahweh spoke to Moshe. We're going to shift to the priestly army. Verse 6, bring the tribe of Levi near and present them before Aharon the priest, that they may serve him. Okay, that means they're his servants. Okay, and in Hebrew, the word servant, slave, it's interchangeable. Okay, one is a hired servant, and then one is just a slave. Okay, but it means the same thing. It means you work for him, right? Yes? So, verse 7, and they shall attend to his needs, meaning Aharon's going to be responsible, and they report to him. That's it. Zeu, period. Okay. They shall attend to his needs and also the needs of the whole congregation, because part of their job is to teach the difference between what is set apart and what is profane. That's a big job, kind of like school teachers, so to speak. It's a big job. So they will serve his needs and the needs of the whole congregation before the tabernacle of meeting to do the work of the tabernacle. And again, this is one of those things, Ephraim's like, work? Like, to do the what? The work? They read and then they ate lunch with their friends. It's like, okay, brothers, equal weights and measures, principles and precepts remain the same, okay? It manifests different in the dispersion than it does in the land of Israel because of the order of Melchizedek rather than the order of Levi. But the principles and the precepts remain the same. You have two different kinds of armies, and both of them, there's something to do. Both of them, there is work. Okay, so let's take a look at this work. This word work, it's Strong's Hebrew Concordance 5647, abad, a very basic word. Everyone needs to know this word. It's related to the word eved, servant, slave, eved. So this is abad. It's a primitive root to work or to serve in any sense. By implication, to serve. Okay, causatively to enslave, because you report. Who do you report to? You're his servant in Hebrew. Okay, so to keep in bondage. Okay, think about it. We'll come back to that. To keep in bondage, to be bondmen or to become bondmen. Okay, abad. You're going to serve. That's it. You're going to work for, in any sense. Okay. So if we serve Yahweh, we do the things of Yahweh. That's it. Okay. If we don't serve Yahweh, let's say we serve the Lord, we're going to do the things of the Lord. Okay. If we serve Hashem, we're going to do the Talmud and not the. If we serve Yahweh, we're going to keep Tanakh and Brit Chadasha. If we serve Hashem or Adonai, we're going to keep the Talmud. That's basically what who do you serve? Okay, if you're going to serve Mystery Babylon, you're going to end up worshiping the Pope or one of the many daughters of the Roman Empire. So to work in any sense or to serve in any sense, to be the servant of or to do the service of. So, this is a very important principle. I hope I quote it correctly. I believe the rabbis have an old saying, whoever's calendar you keep, that's who you worship. Okay, and that's true. So that's why we pay strict attention to the calendar that's there in the written Torah of Moshe. Okay, and so then you have the rabbinical calendar, then you have, and you also have the Karaite, the Messianic calendar, which we talk in great detail about why those are wrong. Then you have your lunar Sabbath calendar. You're serving the moon effectively. You have your equinox calendar. You're also serving the moon because it's based on the equinox, which doesn't appear in Scripture. Okay, so who do you serve? Or do you serve anyone? Do you perhaps rather serve yourself? because you're not going to do what Yahweh says to do. You're not going to do what Mashiach Nagid says to do. Okay? You don't understand what it is to have an Elohim. Okay? You're living a parasitic lifestyle. Okay? Elohim doesn't like parasites. He's going to say, I never knew you. Okay, so moving forward, this is the job of the tribe of Levi. This is the role of a prophet, is to tell the people what they don't want to hear, even though they don't want to hear it, because they need to hear it. You're being their friend. You're telling them what they need to know, whether they appreciate it or not. So you come to Bemidbar, chapter 3, starting verse 8. So Levi also shall attend to all the furnishings of the tabernacle of meeting. Okay, you need to keep the restaurant in good shape, and to the needs of the children of Israel. They've got a big job to do the work of the tabernacle. Okay, do we understand that there's principles and precepts? There's also work for the tabernacle of David. Okay, verse 9, and you shall give the Levites to Aharon. He's going to direct that whole thing, and his sons. So the rest of Levi is given entirely to him from among the children of Israel. That means Levi's going to be in charge. It's going to be a benevolent dictatorship. That's the idea. That's what Yahweh is saying. Yahweh doesn't do democracy. Yahweh does benevolent dictatorship. So come to Bemidbar 3 and verse 10. He says, so you shall appoint Aharon and his sons, and they shall attend to their priesthood, because there's something to do, and the outsider who comes near shall be put to death. Okay, now what about all those ministers? All those dumb, greedy dogs who do not know how to bark. They're muddying the waters with their feet. They're making six-figure incomes, some of them. They're teaching people they don't have to organize. They don't have to do everything. They don't have to obey Yeshua. Okay, now what kind of minister says, did Yahweh indeed say you have to obey the words of Mashiach Nagid? Okay, that's what we're dealing with here. Okay, we're dealing with the serpent. Okay, you have to say no to the serpent. The serpent will find his way in any way he can. We have to do, brothers, even if it wasn't the end times, even if this wasn't the end times, we still have to, we're all going to go to the judgment. We're all going to stand before the throne. And we're going to have to appeal to Yeshua. Would you please intercede for me? And how's it going to feel when he says, did you do what I said to do? And you have to say no. Okay, how's that going to feel, brothers? Okay, so Bemidbar 3 and verse 11, Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, now behold, I myself have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel instead of every firstborn who opens the womb among the children of Israel. Therefore, the Levites shall be mine. We talked about this earlier. So you had the firstborn priesthood defiled itself in the sin of the golden calf. Yahweh took the Levites. Okay, verse 13, because all the firstborn are mine. On the day that I struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I set myself apart. I set apart to myself all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. They shall be mine. I am Yahweh, and you are not. You are my servant. You need to do what I say if you want to be counted as entering into my program. Verse 14, then Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, now we're going to do a swap here. Basically, it's a prisoner swap, okay, a servant swap, an Eved swap. So number the children of Levi by their fathers' houses, by their families. You shall number every male from a month old and above. Okay, so he didn't die young. He got at least to a month old and above. So Moshe numbered them according to the word of Yahweh, as he was commanded. All who were numbered of the Levites, whom Moshe and Aharon numbered at the commandment of Yahweh by their families, all the males from a month old and above were 22,000. Okay, so 22,000 flat and no change. Okay, now hold that number in mind. In verse 40, Then Yahweh said to Moshe, now number all the firstborn males of the children of Israel. So you're numbering all the Levites from a month old and above. Now we're going to number all the firstborn males from a month old and above and take the number of their names. And we're going to compare. Okay, and you shall take the Levites for me. I am Yahweh. Oh, and I forgot, I should mention this. Let me just back up and hit this here. So verse 39, all the males from a month old and above of the tribe of Levi were 22,000. Okay, very small tribe. If you remember, Judah had something like 76,000. And the point here is numbers is not the thing. Numbers is not it. Numbers is not the thing. Okay, so let's come forward, take this 22,000 flat, and then now we're going to number all the firstborn of Israel. So verse 41, and you shall take the Levites from me, I am Yahweh, instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel. And the livestock of the Levites, you're going to take that instead of the livestock of the firstborn of the children of Israel. Okay, so what happened? Verse 43, Moshe numbered all the firstborn among the children of Israel as Yahweh had commanded him. And he numbered also all the firstborn males according to the number of names from a month old and above. Of those who were numbered of them, there wasn't just 22,000 flat, it was 22,273. So there's a difference, there's a discrepancy, so to speak, of 273 firstborn males. Okay, so the firstborn males, they're still effectively the priesthood, but there's 273 more of them than the Levites that are going to replace them. Okay, so we're trying to make things even, trying to balance things out. What are we going to do? Verse 44. So then Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, now take the Levites, take the 22,000, instead of the 22,200, cheat here, 207, I got it right, 273 among the children of Israel, and the livestock instead of their livestock. Okay, so make the swap. 22,000 versus 22,273. Verse 46, and what are we going to do about the difference? And for the redemption of the 273 of the firstborn of the children of Israel, who are more than the number of the Levites. So 22,000 Levites, 20,273. Okay, take 5 shekels for each one individually. Okay, the extra 273, and you shall take them in the currency of the shekel of the sanctuary, the shekel of 20 gerahs. Okay, notice what's happening here. We're setting something up. And you shall give the money with which the excess number of them is redeemed to Aharon and his sons. Okay, so there's a redemption going on here. Okay, we need to see this, because I think most people, they look at the job of the Levites and they think that it's an easy life. I think, and I've met lots of ministers. They have easy lives. I met this one minister. This one time, I take my truck in to get serviced. This is back when I was in the States. Take my truck in to get serviced, and some local pastor with a big, huge congregation has his Cadillac or whatever it was that he had, and he's like, well, where are you going to go? He's like, oh, I don't know. I'm just going to Hawaii for a couple of weeks, I guess. It's like, okay, so talk about a broad, easy road congregation. Okay, so to Hawaii, like, you're not going to go to Jerusalem. Or, I mean, at least even Rome, you could understand, you know what I'm saying? Or Paul's missionary voyages, anything like that, anything at all like that, something biblically related. No, I guess I'm going to go to Hawaii for a couple of weeks. So of course he has a big congregation because he's willing to tell the people whatever they want to hear, just keep muddling along on the broad, easy Babylonian road, and everything will be just fine. Okay, so if you're doing, and I've met Messianic ministers, again, that knocking down 6-figure incomes, net is their take-home pay. I mean, it's all kind of crazy. Like, do you fear Yahweh? So you can't fear Yahweh if that's how you're behaving. So to do the job right, it's a hard walk. It's sacrifice to do the job right. Okay, so, but we come here to verse 48, and he says, so you shall give this money The 5 shekels times the extra 273, which was the excess number of them is redeemed to Aharon and his sons because they're going in. Okay, they're going into the service. Okay, the firstborn priesthood is being liberated from service. They're gaining their freedom, so to speak. And the Levites are losing their freedom. Okay, now come to chapter 4. Now, this is the New King James Version, verse 1. Then Yahweh spoke to Moshe and Aharon, saying, some liquid. Take a census of the sons of Kohath. That's one of the sub-tribes of Levi, one of the clans of Levi, from among the children of Levi, by their families, by their father's house, from 30 years old and above, even to 50 years old, all who enter the service to do the work in the tabernacle of meeting. So, if you look at that in the King James Version, there's some people that prefer King James. So, Yahweh spoke to Moshe and unto Aaron, take the sum of the sons of Kohath from among the sons of Levi, as that I changed the names there. I always do that. After their families, by the house of their fathers. Verse 3, from 30 years old and upward, even until 50 years old, all that enter into the host to do the work in the tabernacle of the congregation. Like the host, it's like, what are we talking about? We're talking about Hostess cupcakes, Hostess Twinkies. Okay, no, we're going to host a big party. Okay, I'm your host, the MC, right? Okay, no. Let's look up this word. It's Strong's Hebrew 6635. It's from 6633. It's a mass of persons or things, especially regularly organized for war. We're talking about a standing army. Okay, by implication, a campaign, because armies go on campaign, literally or figuratively. Specifically, hardship and worship. Right? So we're talking about an army, we're talking about a company, we're talking about a host, we're talking about a service. We're talking about attending, we're talking about waiting upon, we're talking about soldiers, and we're talking about war. Okay, now, if there's nothing to do, then how do we explain the first century? So 2 Timothy chapter 2, starting in verse 3, Shaul tells Timothy, you must therefore endure hardship as a good soldier of Yeshua HaMashiach. He says, for no one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. Okay, now, friends, here's the question. Okay, do we have this soldier mentality, or do we have what might be called a peacetime mentality? Okay, so we can understand the need for a physical army. Okay, we get that. Can we understand the need for a standing spiritual army, especially if that's what the renewed covenant says? Okay, then there's a whole lot of people. I've heard a whole lot of things. One woman tells me, we don't need any go-between. We don't need an intermediary. We just dial direct. Just get your cell phone out and dial direct. And that's she thinks that's all there is. Okay, is that what this says? Okay, we just got a bunch of dudes hanging out. They're sacrificing. There's no support. They're not building any organization. There's no basis behind Acts 15. There's no basis behind Acts 21. There's no basis behind Titus 1 and verse 5. Nothing like that. We just get to 2 Timothy. We just tear that out. We're not going to obey that. Endure hardship. What are you talking about? Being a good soldier of Yeshua? No. Yeshua is my genie in a magic bottle. I just go to him. I rub the lamp when I want something. I just dial direct and ask, hey, could I have this, please? I'm not going to give anything back. I'm not going to enter a relationship with him. This is all about me. So that's the way most people look at it. Let's take a 7-minute prayer break, talk amongst yourselves, and we'll come back and talk about the Haftarah. Okay, shalom and welcome back. And now we're going to continue with the Haftarah prophetic portion. It technically is supposed to be Hosea chapter 2, but if you're going to do chapter 2, you might as well do chapter 1 if you're going to do anything real, because chapter 1 explains and sets the stage for chapter 2. Let's jump right in, but first we want to take a quick refresh on these 4 main roles in Israel. So we've been talking before about how the king, kings are not necessarily nice people. Kings get the job done, so to speak. So it's, you're going to you're going to make an omelet, you need to break a few eggs. This is the kingship approach. Okay, they're concerned with power. That's what they do. Not necessarily nice. The prayer is that they be righteous. That's what you want. And now your priest also doesn't necessarily like prophets. Neither the kingship nor the priesthood really wants prophets around. What they want is they want to take the gifting and then they want to do their own thing with it, which is why we have the Talmud that we have today. Now, enter the role of the prophet. As we said before, the prophet is going to hear from Yahweh. He's going to transmit Yahweh's messages, the things of Yahweh, the words of Yahweh to the people. And again, this can be like Isaiah, thus saith Yahweh, this will happen. It can also be forthtelling. You're speaking the things of Yahweh. You're saying these are how they apply. And we'll talk about the anointed judge later in the renewed covenant section. The anointed judge has to have the prophetic gift. It's typically a mix of all 3. And we'll talk about that in the renewed covenant section. Let's just jump in. Hosea 1 and verse 1. Now, Hosea was considered one of the minor prophets, but he's a major prophet, so to speak, for the house of Ephraim, because he does minister to both houses. He speaks truth to both houses, but mostly it's oriented toward the house of Ephraim. And if your name is Ephraim, wow, we need to be in this book. This book helps us so much to know what to do. Chapter 1, verse 2. When Yahweh began to speak by Hosea, Yahweh said to Hosea, go, take yourself a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry, for the land has committed great harlotry by departing from Yahweh. Verse 3, so he went and took Gomer, not Gomer Pyle, but the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. So we looked this up. Gomer, because all names in Scripture are prophetic, comes from 1584. We'll take a look at that in a minute. It means completion, but not necessarily a good completion. It's like you're finished, you're done. Hit the locker room, hit the showers. Okay, so Gomer, the name of a son of Japheth and of his descendants, also the wife of Hosea. Okay, look up the reference at 1584. It's Gamar. This is the primitive root. It means to end, okay, in the sense of completion or finishing or failure. You're done. Hit the showers. Cease, come to an end, fail. Okay, you're finishing, but it's not a good finish. You're done. Verse 4, then Yahweh said to him, call his name Yisrael, for in a little while I will avenge the bloodshed of Yisrael on the house of Jehu and bring to an end the kingdom of the house of Israel. Very important to distinguish. See, he's not saying that he's going to bring an end to the people of the northern house of Israel or Joseph or Ephraim, but he's going to bring an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. We're going to come back to this in the renewed covenant portion. So we looked this up. So Yisrael, it's 2 words put together. It's from 2232, which we'll look at in just a second, and Hebrew 4:10, El, or Elohim. And what it means is Elohim will sow, or Elohim will scatter, Elohim will seed. And we think of all of Yeshua's agricultural parables. Okay, so let's look up the reference. 2232, it's Zara. So it's a primitive root meaning to sow seed. Figuratively, to disseminate. So semen, disseminate, or to plant, to seed. Okay, to conceive seed, or to sow, anything to do with sowing. So again, Yeshua has the parable of the sower. And now again, just to refresh from the last few weeks, in the Assyrian diaspora, after Judah threatened to scourge us, we left. King Jeroboam set up a different Torah. Again, kings don't like prophets. They want to do whatever they want to do, and his own priesthood. And priesthoods don't like prophets. They want to do whatever they want to do. So as a result of this, Yahweh took our forefathers in the northern house of Joseph or Israel or Ephraim, and also a large number of the southern tribes with us, and we went into the Assyrian dispersion. And there were 3 waves of dispersion. But from there, and as with all of the Assyrian diaspora, or the Assyrian seeding, the Assyrian dispersion, and also with the Judah's exiles, both of them, the 2 houses went every which way to all 4 corners of the earth. So, and that's just, we talk about that more in the Nazarene Israel study if you have questions on that. So come back to Hosea chapter 1 and verse 6. Now Gomer conceived again, and this time she bore a daughter. And Elohim said to him, call her name Lo Ruhamah, no mercy, no compassion. It says, for I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, or Ephraim, or Joseph, but I will utterly take them away, because the kingdom is going to be ended. So we're going to get taken away and scattered into the earth like seed. We talk about all the agricultural parables in the Nazarene Israel study. But let's look up this name. So Lo Ruhamah, so it's from Hebrew 3808, which is lo, no, and 7355, meaning not pitied, no mercy, no compassion, not pitied. Okay, so we look up the root. It's Raham. It's related to Rechem. So Rechem is a womb. So Raham is a primitive root to fondle, by implication to love, especially to be compassionate love, to have compassion on the house of Israel, to have compassion on the house of Ephraim, to love the house of Ephraim, to show mercy to the house of Ephraim, to have pity on the house of Ephraim. Yahweh says, no more. You've messed up too much. You're taking me for granted. You're trampling on everything I've done for you. No more. You're done. Out you go. You disobey the rules of the garden. You have to leave. And here come the cherubim, and they pull out a sword after you. Okay, so now verse 8. Now when she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, now this time she conceived and bore a son. Then Elohim said, call his name Lo Ami, not my people. No, my people. For you are not my people, and I will not be your Elohim any longer. You guys don't want to behave like I'm your Elohim? You're just calling me for what you want? You're not going to obey my rules. You're going to make up your own rules? Levi, are you listening? Okay, if you're not going to obey my rules, if you're not going to follow my covenant, I will not be your Elohim. Levi, are you listening? So we look it up. Strong's Hebrew 3813, Lo Ami. It's again from Lo 3808, no, and 5971 with the pronominal suffix not my people. Lo Ami. Okay, so we're not going to be his people anymore, and that's exactly what happened. We look it up. So Hebrew 5971 from 6004. It means a people, but check this out. It means a people as a congregated unit. So we're not just talking a bunch of people floating around on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Everyone's tweeting everybody. Everyone's got, whatever SMS text they got going on. That's not it. Okay. It's a congregated unit, specifically a tribe, as in the tribes of Israel, hence collectively troops. We're talking about the armies of Israel. We're talking about the 12 tribes. They have the physical temporal army. And then you have the tribe of Levi, your priestly tribe, and they have a spiritual army. They have the host. Well, so you have troops. You have attendants in the portable Garden of Eden restaurant. So that's how you get when you talk about a flock or a folk or men or a people or a nation. Okay, and again, in scripture, your belief set is your nation. Okay, the Pharisees, the Orthodox, actually get this right. So when you look in Scripture, you've got the Pharisees, which today are the Orthodox Jews, and you've got the Sadducees, which are today the Karaites descend from the Sadducees. So the Pharisees, so that's basically two different nations. Because why? Because it's two different halachot. It's two different belief sets. It's two different ways to walk the Torah. And both of them depart, guess what, from Yahweh's word in the Tanakh. And our goal is to come together as a single people in the Genesis 35 Alliance by focusing on Elohim's word, because we can all agree Elohim's word is Elohim's word. Now we just have to agree to enter in. That's all. Okay, so then now we come to Hosea chapter 1 and verse 10. Now, the Jewish Publication Society, they start chapter 2 right here. So it says, so Hosea 1:10 for the Christian versions, and Jewish Publication Society, this starts chapter 2, verse 10 in English, or in in the Christian Bibles. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. Okay, you're not going to take a census of it. Okay, they talk about some, give or take, some 2.2 billion Christians worldwide. Well, most of that is Asav. A small portion is Protestant. But you can't measure them. You can't number them. You can't take a census. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, lo ami. There it shall be said to them, you are the sons of the living Elohim. So, but we're not all going to come home. Okay, this is the problem. And this is trying to get Ephraim's attention on this. I just, I pray, I'm up at night. I try to say the same thing every week. Got to get Ephraim's attention on this, because we're not understanding the requirement to be a people. We're not understanding the requirement to be organized. We're not understanding the requirement to form the stick of Joseph in the hand of Ephraim. Okay, we're not getting that yet. We need to get that. We need to do things according to Elohim's word. Or what are we going to say in the day of judgment? It's not going to go well. And it's not going to go well before the day of judgment either. Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 10 and verse 20. And it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel, the 10% who survive what's coming, and such as have escaped of the house of Jacob, because Judah went into the exile or into the dispersion with us. And then Assyria was swallowed up by Babylon. That's why we're in Babylon today. That's why the Messianic movement is in Mystery Babylon, is because Babylon swallowed up Assyria. So the Messianics also are in Mystery Babylon. But it says after this, after the destruction, after 90% get taken and a tithe effectively of us remain, we will never again depend on him who defeated us, but we will depend instead on Yahweh, the set-apart one of Israel, in truth, and the truth is the Torah. Verse 21, he says, in spite of the Noahide laws, it says the remnant will return, the 10%, the remnant of Jacob, Judah also will come with us, to the mighty Elohim. For although your people, O Israel, or Ephraim, or Joseph, be as the sand of the sea, there's 2.2 billion of us, only a remnant of them, of us, will return. Then he says, the destruction decreed shall overflow with righteousness. Because why? Because 90% didn't want to enter into his program. It says, for Yahweh Elohim of hosts will make a determined end in the midst of all the land, or in the midst of all the earth. So we come then, but again, Yahweh's punishments are not forever. After the discipline, after the time of punishment of Ezekiel 4 is run out, he says in Hosea 1:11, or 2 and verse 2 in the JPS, then the children of Judah and the children of Israel, Ephraim, shall be gathered together, and they shall appoint for themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel. So this is coming. So your Noahide nonsense, that's out the window. I know people who want to stay in the United States. I mean, like, what's that about? I don't understand that. So Yahweh continues with the blessings. So 2 in verse 1, or in the JPS, 2 in verse 3, he says, say to your brethren, you are my people. Ami, no longer lo ami, now we're ami. And to your sisters, mercy is shown. Ruhama. But then it changes. The next verse, verse 2, he says, bring charges against your mother. Okay, who is our mother? Okay, Rome in a certain sense. And we owe, let's read the verse, bring charges against your mother. Bring charges, for she, the mystery Babylonian church, is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Okay, let her put away her harlotries from her sight. We're talking the Messianic movement also. And her adulteries from between her breasts. And what are we talking about here? Mystery Babylon is any time you say, we're following the Bible, but you're not. Okay? So Mystery Babylon, it's confusion. So they're not just reading the word and doing what the word says. They're not preaching from the word. They're not sitting down to figure out, okay, how do we actually do this book? Okay, so that's the very first thing I did. I had to prove to myself from the Tanakh or the Old Testament that the Messiah had already come. And after that, it was a question, okay, now what does he want? What does he say he wants? And how do we give him what he says he wants if we believe this book? So anytime we say we're obeying his book, but we're not, we're causing confusion. And confusion is of Babylon. That's how that works. Okay, so at least in a certain sense, we owe Rome a huge debt of gratitude because we were out worshiping rocks and sticks and trees and, lizards and what you got. You know what I'm saying? We were making up our own Elohim. And Rome came along, and after Emperor Constantine, it was, Sunday go meeting or be dead. So either we had to join Esau's program or we would die. Okay. And as horrible as that was, and as abominable as that was, and as against scripture as that is, at least they got us in scripture, and then a remnant of us decided to break free of that. And for a little more than 10 Jubilee cycles, for a little more than 500 years, we have been studying and reading scripture for ourselves. But the problem is people are getting, so there's been this process for the last 500 and some years for us to come back to the original faith. But the problem is people, they don't. They stop on the wayside. They get comfortable. They get complacent. They decide they don't need to work out their salvation in fear and in trembling. They don't need to submit to everything what this book says. And that's a deadly, tragic, fatal mistake, brothers, sisters. So we need to be straight with ourselves. We need to be honest with our Elohim. Ask ourselves, what have we done for Elohim today? What have we done for his kingdom today? If we want to be his helper bride, what are we helping him with? Are we helping him with anything? Or are we just fooling ourselves, telling ourselves that we're putting oil in our lamp and we're preparing our wedding garment just because we're reading what we're supposed to be doing? I keep asking that question. I sure wish some of the Messianic leaders and teachers would answer that question, but they can't. Not unless they change their doctrine to the original Jude 3 doctrine. Okay. Yahweh says, bring charges against your mother, Esau, house of Rome. He says, she is not my wife. Okay. The Torah is a marital covenant. She's not obeying the Torah. She's saying the marital covenant was nailed to the cross. Okay. Yahweh says, I'm not her husband. Okay. Let her put her harlotries away from her sight. Okay. Who is the harlot? Let her put her adulteries. Okay. And idolatry is spiritual adultery from between her breasts. Okay, so who is the harlot? Lest I strip her naked and expose her as in the day she was born, and make her like a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. And scripture says Esau is going down after Armageddon. Verse 4, and I will not have mercy on her children, okay, lo ruchama, for they are children of harlotry. Okay, they're not keeping Yahweh's word. This is written to Ephraim. This is written to us. So, brother, let me ask you, are you obeying everything the renewed covenant says to do? Or are you making excuses? Okay, is your practice, is your walk pure and clean? Are you entering into Yeshua's program, which is designed to restore the original Edenic conditions upon the earth eventually? Or are you not? That tells us which side of this verse we're on. And it's deadly serious. And today is the day of salvation. Verse 5, for their mother, Esau, Rome, has played the harlot. We were in Esau's house for 1,260 years. We learned a lot of bad habits. We learned a lot of Esau's manners and mannerisms. She who conceived them, when Rome said, Sunday go meeting or be dead. Okay, she conceived us. Rome pulled us back. Yahweh, as bad as Mystery Babylon is, that's how powerful Yahweh is Yahweh used Mystery Babylon to do his will, to do his work. If we don't want to be obedient, he'll use us as a tool to do his work, but we won't get the reward. It says, she has, who has conceived them has behaved shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers, the lords, Ishtar, Easter, Bacchanalia or Saturn in Saturnalia, Christmas. I will go after my lovers who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my linen. Oh, yes, we get so much because we keep Sunday, Christmas, and Easter. Oh, yes, things are so lovely now. Sunday, Christmas, and Bacchanalia, Saturn, and Ishtar, they give us our wool and our linen, our oil and our drink. No, they don't. So take a look at what's happening in the democratic West today. Verse 6, we departed from Yahweh's way of governance. We gave ourselves into the hand of Mystery Babylon and the democratic political process. Verse 6, therefore, behold, I will hedge up your way with thorns and wall her in so that she cannot find her paths. What is happening in the United States of America today? Oh my. Father, help us, please. Okay, who is the harlot? Hit Galut, Sodot, Revelation 17 and verse 1. Then one of the seven messengers who had the seven bowls or the seven cups of wrath, the judgments, came and talked with me, saying to me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. And I didn't have time to put in the slide, but we talk about this in Revelation and the End Times in the chapter America, Mystery Babylon, or I forget the title, but America is land of Babylon. That's what it is. So where did we go here? Pushing all the wrong buttons here. Nope, we got the right buttons. So the great harlot who sits on many waters. Okay, that's not Rome. It's definitely not Iraq. Okay, America, land of Babylon. It's also in the YouTube series Revelation and the End Times. United States of America, Ephraim, has given itself into the hand of the harlot. Okay, we need to leave the United States of America or get prepared for a civil war and then a nuclear catastrophe, nuclear destruction. Some liquid. Verse 7, And you see the revival movements in the United States. Trump, Trump, President Trump. Verse 7, she will chase her lovers, but will not overtake them, because it's not in the church. Or the solution is not in the church. Yes, she will seek them, but will not find them. Then she will say, I guess I need to go and return to my first husband. I guess I need to go back to the original Jude 3 halakha, for it was better for me then than now. Absolutely correct. Verse 8, for she did not know that I gave her grain or new wine and oil, and then multiplied her silver and gold, which they prepared for the Lord, Baal. So worshiping all the wrong gods. And if you want to know how the name Baal is connected to the name the Lord, we have a study called the Set Apart Names. I need to update the YouTube version, but the information is all still accurate. Very important study. You can find it on the website. Very important study. You need to understand the names. We need to not call on the names of false Elohim, the Lord, Hashem, Adonai. Those are not his name. They're not the name he gives us to remember him by. Hosea 2 and verse 9, or verse 11 in JPS. Therefore, I will return and take away my grain in its time. Take a look at what's happening in the United States of America. They're paying farmers to trash their crops, not to grow crops. I will take away my new wine in its season. Political is not the answer. And I will take back my wool and my linen given to cover her nakedness, because they've abandoned my program. They're not following my program. They're not following my son's program. Neither program are they following. Verse 10. So now what am I going to do? I'm not going to lose. Give me a break. I'm the script writer. Now I'm going to uncover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and no one shall deliver her from my hand. Brothers and sisters, America, land of Babylon, in the Nazarene, or in the Revelation and the End Times study, and in Revelation Simplified, brothers and sisters, you have a choice, and it's your choice. Either prepare to leave the land of Babylon, or prepare for first a civil war and then nuclear destruction. So it is your choice. Some people will choose both paths. It's just safer, smarter, better to follow the one Yahweh has for us. It's more obedient. Jeremiah 50:51. We talk about it in that study. Okay, continuing on. He tells us what's coming up. You know, especially if you're in the United States, he tells us what's coming up. And there will be distress of all the nations as well. Verse 11, I will also cause all her mirth to cease. It's not going to be a good place to live. I'm going to cause her false feast days, her false new moons, her false Sabbaths, Sunday, Christmas, Easter, all her appointed feasts, sunrise, Easter ham. Verse 12, and I will destroy her vines. That's a reference to Ephraim or Joseph. So we're talking about the churches. And I will destroy her fig trees. That's a reference to Judah that is attached with Joseph. So there's going to be problems with the synagogues, of which she has said, these are my wages that my lovers, the Lord, Adonai, and Hashem have given me. So I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field shall eat them. And once again, if we believe Scripture, do we believe Yahweh when he speaks about the destruction of the United States in Jeremiah 50:51 and says to leave? Enough said. Verse 13, I will punish her for the days of the Baals, or the lords, to which she burned incense. And she decked herself with her earrings and jewelry. It's a very prosperous land. And she went after her lovers, but me she forgot, says Yahweh. Because you know why? How do I know that? Because I'm inspecting her fruit. She's not showing good fruit. She's not doing what I said to do. She's not serving me. She's serving the Lord, Hashem, and Adonai. So they'll give her what she wants in the short term, but it's not going to work for her long term. Verse 14, therefore, behold, I will allure her and will bring her into the wilderness. That's a difficult place to be. So Bemidbar, and speak comfort to her. Okay. Speaking comfort, meaning if you abandon your old ways, if you quit reading my word, but not wanting to enter into my word, if you quit trampling on my son's sacrifice, I will take you back. But you've got to enter in. There is no peace treaty without entering in. I'm not going to have disobedient servants. That's what this whole thing is about. It's been 6,000 years we didn't want to obey him. He's trapping us in. He's using our evil inclinations to bring about an end time catastrophe, essentially, by letting us follow the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, by letting us follow what our flesh wants. He knows how to channel us. He knows how to direct us and mold us and guide us. If we're not going to obey him the easy way, we're going to obey him the hard way, or we're going to die. We need to ask ourselves, do we believe this book? So he says, I will allure her, house of Ephraim, with Judah attached, and I will bring her into the wilderness. Bemidbar means it's a tough time. And I will speak comfort to her. If you will obey me, I will take you back. Verse 15, and in that context, I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Echor as a door of hope. She shall sing there as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she came up from the land of Egypt. And we'll see that this is because we finally realized following Babylon is going to get you nothing but killed in the end. Is not going to serve, Yahweh's not going to be happy. And we're going to respond. We're going to realize, oh yeah, I guess after a civil war and a nuclear war, I guess maybe we need to give up. Okay. Strong's Hebrew 59:11, Achor, from 59:16, troubled. So he's going to bring us into the wilderness of troubles, and he's going to speak to our heart. So, verse 16, and it shall be in that day, we're talking about after Armageddon, after the whole thing is done. Okay, World War III is coming up. They're going to say that's Gog and Magog. It's actually Seal 6. We talk about that in the Revelation study. And then you've got a civil war in the United States, and then you're going to have World War IV, effectively. And World War IV, that's the all-out. And so then you've got, after World War IV, the cup judgments. Then you're going to have Armageddon, the last final battle before the millennium starts. Verse 16, and it shall be in that day, says Yahweh, that you will call me Ishi, my man, and no longer call me Baali, my Lord. Again, in the set-apart name study, verse 17, for I will take from her mouth the names of the lords, or the Baals, and they shall be remembered by their name no more. So again, refer you to the set-apart names study. And there's also a study on why it's, I'm not sure which volume it's in, I think volume 3, but there's also a study on why not the name Yehovah, why that's not a clean pronunciation. So let's just come here to Yehezkel or Ezekiel 39, starting in verse 22. Okay, we're talking about here is the first war of Gog and Magog. There are 2 wars of Gog and Magog. Okay, and they're in inverse order. That's how the mystery stays sealed. Chapter 38, that's the second war. Chapter 39, that's the first war. We talk about that in the Revelation study. Verse 22. So after all this, after Armageddon, after the wedding feast, the house of Israel shall know that I am Yahweh their Elohim from that day forward. The Gentiles, the returning Gentile Christian Ephraimites, shall know that the house of Israel went into captivity for their iniquity. They're going to realize Babylon's not it. Sunday, Christmas, Easter, messianic disorganization, that's not it. because they were unfaithful to me. Yeah, forgetting the two different types of armies. We don't need an army. We've got Facebook. Because they were unfaithful to me, therefore I hid my face from them. We didn't do his program. We did not enter into his program. Therefore, he hid his face from us. We didn't want to do his program, so he gave us into the hand of all of our enemies, and we all fell by the sword. Are we happy yet? Are we fun? Is it fun yet? So coming back to Hosea chapter 2 and verse 18, or 2 and verse 20 in the JPS, we're talking about the Armageddon time frame. He says, in that day, I will make a covenant for them, a marital covenant. The Torah is a marital covenant. The Torah is a ketubah. In that day, okay, after Armageddon, when Yeshua has appeared in the clouds and everyone can see him, Mount of Olives is split in two. Everyone gets it. In the two houses become one. In that day, I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, with the birds of the air, and with the creeping things of the ground. Bow and sword of battle I will shatter from the earth to make them lie down safely, because the millennial reign of Mashiach Nagid is about to begin. So we come here to Yechezkel 39 and verse 17. Again, the first war of Gog and Magog. Okay, we're talking Armageddon. And as for you, son of man, thus says Yahweh Elohim, speak to every sort of bird and to every beast of the field, assemble yourselves and come, gather together from all sides to my sacrificial meal, which I am sacrificing for you, a great sacrificial meal on the mountains of Israel, that you may eat flesh and drink blood. Okay, we're talking about a battlefield strewn and littered with bodies. And here come the beasts of the field and the birds of the air for a great big feast. That's the wedding banquet in spiritual terms. We see it in Hosea chapter 2 and verse 19 or verse 21 in the JPS. He says, I will marry you. I will take you as mine. No matter what you did in the past, if you turn back and enter in, I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know Yahweh. No more Lord, no more Adonai, no more Hashem. Yahweh, Ishi, our man. Verse 21, it shall come to pass in that day, in the reign of Mashiach Nagid, that I will answer, says Yahweh. I will answer the heavens, and they shall answer the earth. The earth shall answer with grain, with new wine, and with oil, and they shall answer Israel. So this whole great Assyrian diaspora, this whole great seeding into the earth, it's been a long time growing in vegetative state. Now we're nearing the end times. You're starting to see the blossoming, the budding, the flowering. You're starting to see actual real fruit develop. You're starting to see people getting themselves ready for the harvest. It's still early yet. People are still in the Messianic movement still. People are still in the Ephraimite movement. Okay, it's not what Yeshua says to do, but it's a step. Okay, but none of us knows how long we have, so we have to use today wisely. We have to choose this day that we're going to obey Mashiach Nagid. Verse 23, then I will sow her for myself in the earth, and I will have mercy, ruchama, on her who have not obtained mercy, lo ruchama, and I will say to those who were not my people, lo ami, you are my people, ami, and they shall say, you are my Elohim. And again, what does it mean to know that he is our Elohim? It's like we behave like we don't even know what an Elohim is sometimes. You know, when you say you have an Elohim, it's like we know what it is to have a boss. Some of us who've been in the military, we know what it is to have a commanding officer. and you don't tell him no. But Judah and Levi, they're the kind of soldiers that say, yes, sir, and then they go and do their own program. And Ephraim, we're the kind of people, we say, yes, sir, and we read about what we're supposed to do, but we don't do it. So Ezekiel, coming back to chapter 39 and verse 25, therefore, thus says Yahweh Elohim, now I will bring back the captives of Jacob, the scattered of Israel, and will have mercy on the whole house of Israel. So you can have mercy on Ephraim and those of Judah who are attached to Ephraim. And I will be jealous for my set-apart name. And the name he revealed to us is Yahweh. Verse 27, and the people will know after I've brought them back from the peoples and gathered them out of their enemies' lands. Okay, and if you're enjoying living in the United States, you're enjoying living in Protestant Western Europe or in the ex-British Empire, these are the enemies' lands. Okay, and if you're in Latin America, these are the enemies' lands. These are not the land of Israel. Okay, and they will know that I am set apart. I'm set apart in them in the sight of many nations. Because what's it going to look like to the rest of the world when Yahweh's prophecies come true and the millennial reign begins? Verse 28, then they shall know that I am Yahweh their Elohim, who sent them into captivity among the nations. Yisrael, we were sown, we were scattered, but also brought them back to their land in spite of the Noahide laws and left none of them captive any longer. So we saw earlier, Ephraim was scattered. Judah was scattered. Some of Judah is attached to Ephraim. Ephraim also will come home with those of Judah who are attached to the house of Ephraim. Now we talk about this in Revelation, the end times, and then we also have Revelation Simplified on YouTube actually has a little bit more information. Father willing, we want to, if we can get the schedule under control here, if Father will send us more helpers, and we can get things under control. We've got a big presentation series we want to do on the 4 horses for you. Much more information than either of those. But at the minute, what we've got is Revelation in the End Times is the book study, and then Revelation Simplified on YouTube. So let's take a short break, and then we'll come back and talk about Yeshua and the 2 armies in the Brit Chadasha. Shalom and welcome back. So people ask sometimes, they say, what are we doing in the Torah portions? So Judah knows why the Torah portions. Sometimes Joseph or Ephraim has no idea. What are we trying to do here in the Torah portions? So what we do the Torah portions for is that so Ephraim, we went into the Assyrian diaspora, and we're just coming back on the scene right now. But Judah then went into the Babylonian exile, and when he came back, that began the Second Temple era, the Second Temple period. So Yeshua came near the end of the Second Temple period, like Daniel 9, verses 25 and 26 say. But when Judah came back from the Babylonian exile, don't know, but it must have gone through their heads. How do we stop this from happening again? What can we do? So the goal, of course, is for the whole nation, for all of us to practice hearing his voice, doing what he says, including all of his written commandments. So, of course, Judah and Joseph, we have other plans, we have other ideas, we don't want to do that. So, but one of the things that Judah did that you could say was good when they came back from the Babylonian exile is they established what we call today the Torah portions. So, like in the Nazaree world, in Christendom, you'll have the Bible in 1 year plans. So this isn't the Bible in 1 year. It's not the whole Bible, but it's the Torah in 1 year, plus some additional snippets. And then the question is, okay, how are these snippets chosen and what are they supposed to do for us and this kind of a thing? But they try to match up something in the prophets that agrees with their theology, and then they go from there. And of course, they edited out Isaiah 53 and other passages like that. But so here we have the Brit Chadasha portion, or the renewed covenant portion. So what are we going to do for it? So we have Luke 16 and 17. We're marching through Luke. But why? How do we get there? Okay. Before we answer that question, let's just do a quick recap again of our four main roles in Israel. So again, you have the king who hates prophets. He leads the temporal army. He doesn't like the restrictions that Yahweh puts on him. He just wants the kingship gift and leave him alone. Priesthood, same thing. Levy, okay, we have our priestly gift. Leave us alone. We're going to do the Talmud, whatever we want to do. Please pray for Levi and Judah. Then you have the prophet who hears the words of Yahweh and goes to tell his people, you're messing up. And why? So then prophesying, foretelling, also forthtelling, bringing forward, explaining, helping people to understand what's wrong, helping people to understand the difference between what's clean and what's unclean. And now you have, in the Brit Chadasha, you have Yeshua, and he is in the anointed judge category. He's a special combination of all three gifts for special circumstances. So, for example, when the book of Hebrews talks about this, when there's a change in a transposition in the places between the priesthoods. So when the Levitical order stepped down, the order of Melchizedek then stepped up. Well, Yeshua is the head of the order of Melchizedek. Yeshua is an anointed judge. Similar to Moshe, Moshe was an exceptional man for exceptional times. Yeshua also was an exceptional man, if it is lawful to call him a man, for exceptional times. So that's what we're talking about here. And then, of course, the Shaliachim, or the apostles, they report to him, just like the Levites reported to Aharon, the high priest. So all the Shaliachim have to report to Yeshua because he's the stone at the head of the corner. Well, so still, it's like, okay, well, what's this Torah portion? Like, what do we do? Okay, so we get we get the portion in the Torah of Bemidbar, or Numbers, and we kind of like, what's the connection to Hoshea? Why was it Hoshea 2? What was that about? Okay, so I go to Wikipedia, like, I don't know, sometimes it's obvious what we're supposed to do. Like sometimes the connections are obvious, other times it's not so obvious. So I look it up, Wikipedia, Bemidbar, Parasha, and so, what's the connection? So we look into the connection between the Haftarah and the Parasha. So it says both the Parasha and the Haftarah recount Israel's numbers. Okay, numbers, right? Numbers chapter 1 through 4. Okay. You have a census in the Parasha, in the Torah portion itself. And in the Haftarah, you have a reference to numbers like that of the sands of the sea. Okay. So both the Parasha and the Haftarah they place Israel in the wilderness, Bemidbar, in the things, so okay, numbers in English. It's like, what's the connection here? Is census numbers? Like, what are what are we doing here? Why are we doing it? So again, we added Hoshea 1 because that explains for Hoshea 2. But then it's like, what are we going to do for a Brit Chadasha? Like, numbers, census? Okay, so we could come here to focus on Luke chapter 2 and verse 1, where it says, it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered, as in for a census. Verse 2, this census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. Verse 3, so all went to be registered, everyone to his own city. Well, verse 4, Yeshua's father Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, to the city of David, which is called Beit Lechem, the house of bread, the house of warfare, because he was of the house and lineage of David. And he went, verse 5, to be registered with Miriam, his betrothed wife, who was with child, who was Yeshua. Okay, well, we're going to look this up. And this is another one. Ephraimites have a terrible time with this. And you can explain the words. You can help him to understand that these are what the words mean. But to get Ephraim to sit down and incorporate this into his being, it can be very, very difficult. So English, great language for what it is. love English. It's not the set apart tongue. And it's not just learning the words, you have to learn different thought patterns. Okay, change your language, change your world, change your life, because it changes your worldview. Because the way the subject and the object, the way things interact is very different in Hebrew. So it causes a radical change in thought patterns. So if you have an opportunity to learn Hebrew or to teach your children Hebrew, I would land on it. Okay, so let's look here. Strong's Hebrew 1035, Beit Lechem, from Hebrew 1004, which is Beit, which is house. Okay, and then from Hebrew 3899, house of bread. So Lechem is bread. It's also Beit Lechem, a place in Judea. So we come here to the root of 3898, Lacham. It's a primitive root meaning to feed upon. Okay, so it's the act of consuming. And now, by implication, there's not enough to consume. So what comes from bread is struggle or battle or war. Okay, so you're feeding on something, there's not enough, you're going to fight over who gets to eat it. So by implication, there's battle because there's feeding. So then there's fighting, and then there's war. So lechem, then lechema, what comes from bread is struggle, and then milchama, that's war. So, but then I thought, well, okay, if we're counting numbers, then you've also got Hitgalut or Sodot or Revelation, chapter 7, starting in verse 4. It talks about the sealing of the 144,000. Now, just in context, if you read the Revelation study, what we're talking about here is right now we're at seal 6. We're waiting for the sky to recede like a scroll. Many people will think it's the tribulation. It's not the tribulation. It's seal 6 and the sky receding like a scroll. And then from that point forward, then you will have the sealing of the 144,000, and then you'll have a half-hour silence in heaven, meaning things won't be changing in heaven because they will have a new world order being established and consolidated here on earth. So you could go to Hitgalut or Revelation, chapter 7, starting in verse 4. I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed, including Judah. Verse 5. Of the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Reuven, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Gad, 12,000 were sealed. Verse 6, it goes on. The tribe of Asher, 12,000. Naphtali, 12,000. Manasseh, 12,000. Here's the harlot version. Of the Catholics, 12,000. Of the Protestants, 12,000. Of the Messianics, 12,000. Of the independent Hebrew roots people, 12,000 were sealed. Just joking. So verse 8, of the chaos salesmen, the book salesmen, 12,000. Of the slackers, 12,000. Of the disobedient, 12,000 were sealed. That's the harlot version. You know, what we're saying here is Yeshua has a program. Okay. We didn't want to follow Yahweh's program in the garden. Then we didn't want to follow Yahweh's program after the first exodus from Egypt when we came to Mount Sinai. And we didn't want to follow Yahweh's program with the sin of the golden calf. We spent 40 years going around in circles in the wilderness. Now Yeshua has come, and we still don't want to enter into his program. We just keep wanting to believe it's going to be okay. You know, somehow we made it through the wilderness. Yahweh brought the children in at least. And then people went into the Babylonian exile. That's not the pathway he wants us to choose. In these end times, we have to do things his way or we don't come home. And this is our last chance. So then I thought, well, we could talk about, last week we had in Parasha Behukotai, so we had Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 18, and we talked about how Yahweh had his program, and Yeshua is offering a program. The program for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's offered. It's right here. Take it. Take it. This is it. Take it. Mashiach Nagid has come to show us how to walk out the written Torah Moshe. We don't want to take it. Only 12 guys and some sisters. That's it. So all the people, no matter whether we're talking the Garden of Eden, we're talking Mount Sinai, we're talking Yeshua, end of the Second Temple period. Okay, everybody all over the place, Ephraim and Judah, with one accord, we're beginning to make excuses. We don't want to give up our sovereignty. We don't want to give up our right to ourselves. We don't want to give up our freedom. We don't want to be Yahweh's slaves. We want to be free agents. We want to be sovereign. The big sovereignty movement, that's a big thing in the United States. I'm a sovereign. It's like, you're not a well, maybe you're a sovereign. I'm a slave. I'm glad to be a slave. But it just seems like the vast majority of everyone begins to make excuses. So the first said, no, I can't. I have a piece of ground. I have to go see it. So please have me excused from your marital covenant. And another said, I gotta check after my money, after my investments, after my livestock. So I'm gonna go test them. Please have me excused from the marital covenant. So another said, yeah, I married a wife. I can't come to your wedding feast because I have an earthly wife. What do I need a spiritual? What do I need to be your bride to be for? What do I need that? Verse 21. So that servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and the lanes of the city and bring in here the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind. Don't worry about census numbers. I invited a whole bunch of folks. Not going to work for them. We're going to find other people who want to enter into my program. Verse 22, and the servant said, Master, it's done as you commanded, and still there is room. Verse 23, the master said to the servant, go out into the highways and the hedges, every family, every nation, every clan, in all the earth, in every tribe, every family, every tongue, every people. Find ones that want to enter into my program and they want to come to my wedding meal. Compel them to come in that my house may be filled. He says, for I say to you that none of those men who were invited but turned down the opportunity to enter into my son's, we failed in the garden, we failed at Mount Sinai. And again, here was Yeshua. We don't do what he says. So, how much good did it, you're going to take a census of your numbers and you're going to look left and right. It's like, well, he's asking to be excused and he's asking to be excused. So I'm just going to ask to be excused. He's not going to kill all of us, right? Okay, this is Elohim we're talking about. He's already told us 10%, a tithe of us, a tenth of us are going to get to come home. The 90% will be destroyed. And the 10% is not where they need to be now. Unless you've entered into his covenant, you're not where you need to be now. It's not a safe place to relax. We're not done yet. We're never done. So in that context, let's come to this week's portion. So I didn't see redoing any of those. So we just could drive on, keep marching on in Luke. So Luke 17, verse 1 and 2, what Yeshua is talking about here is how to be a good member of his spiritual army. Okay, so you had the Levitical spiritual army, you have spiritual army of the order of Melchizedek. Okay, are we going to be members of his team? He's got some very high standards. So Luke 17, starting in verse 1, Yeshua is telling us, you're looking for a perfect world, are you? You're looking for a millennial reign of Mashiach Nagid. You're going to get that, but it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be good enough that we can overcome the challenges because Satan's going to be locked in the pit. So he said to his disciples, verse 1, it is impossible that no offenses should come, because if you didn't have anything to be tested by, How would you learn and grow? Right? But woe to him, woe to the goats through whom the offenses do come. Woe to the wolves, woe to the bear. Verse 2, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones by telling them things like, you don't need to obey Yeshua. You don't need to actually do what Yeshua says. Just buy my books and tapes. Verse 3, Yeshua says, take heed to yourselves. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him, correct him, bring it to his attention, hold him accountable. Ephraim, there's one little, if you don't, is it, yeah. It's like in Ephraim, it's like, if you tie your tzitzit this way and they tie their tzitzit that way, it's like you're going to have a split. It's like Ephraim's looking for reasons to have a split. Ephraim's not looking for reasons to come together on the single foundation of apostles and prophets that obeys Yeshua's doctrine. There's all these other doctrines. There's all these other messianic ministries. They're all, we'll just agree to disagree. If Yeshua was here, what would he say to that? So all scripture is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, that the man of Elohim might be thoroughly equipped for every good work. That means we need to know the doctrine. Okay, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. We don't know the doctrine. We're not walking Yeshua's doctrine. Okay, we're supposed to help each other with that. Here's my contribution. Yeshua says, Luke 17 and verse 3, take heed to yourselves. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him. And if he repents, forgive him. If he sins against Elohim, rebuke him. And if he repents, then Elohim will forgive him. And verse 4, if he sins against you 7 times in a day, just being a perfect number, and 7 times in a day returns to you saying, I repent, and he means it, he's not just sorry he got caught, but he's actually trying to do better, you shall forgive him. This is how we go through life. We need to help each other. Iron sharpens iron. Verse 5. So the apostle said to the master, increase our faith. So he said that. The apostles thought about it. It's like, you know what? We need more faith. So how can we have more faith? Verse 6. So the master said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, be pulled up by the roots and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Maybe it's not necessarily easy. Maybe you have to pray more than once. Maybe you have to keep praying until it happens. But if you pray in faith, it will be done for you. He continues, verse 7, and which of you, having a servant plowing or tending sheep, just like we are supposed to be his under shepherds, will say to him when he has come in from the field, oh, you poor thing, you look famished. Come once and sit down and eat, and I'm going to wait on you. Verse 8, will he not rather say to him, prepare something for my supper, and gird yourself and serve me until I have eaten and drunk, and then afterwards you will eat and drink. And we don't like this. We don't like to think about this. So we like to think about being the bride. So of course the bride is sort of the guest. So during the wedding week, the bride and the groom, they have no additional duties. But he's talking about a relationship here of being servants. He's talking about a relationship here of service. So just as the tribe of Levi was given completely to Aharon the high priest, if you have any aspirations of serving as an under shepherd, we are given to the good shepherd, and we are here to serve him, not to be served, not the other way around. Ephraim has the biggest problem with this. You think about it. So you've got 100 times as many Christians as you have Jews. Why? It's because it's a broad, easy road. So if you're going to be in Judaism, you already know you're going to be organizing, you're going to be tithing, you're going to be working, you're going to be praying a lot, you're going to be doing all sorts of things for the Jewish nation, for the Jewish community. You have to find the place where you can make your contribution, because that is your people and you're surrounded by a sea of enemies. So you all have to work together. So if you're going to convert to Judaism, that can be a tough road depending on how you walk it. Well, Christianity, on the other hand, just call on the name of Jesus and you shall be saved without having to do anything. And if you want to make a contribution, or if you'd like to help the kingdom, or if you want to give something back to Yeshua or not, everyone's a disciple. You're part of his bride just by virtue of the fact of intellectual faith. And this is the difference between the Greco-Roman Babylonian lie and the truth of the Torah, of the Hebraic model. Because in the Greco-Roman model, you think Yeshua is the Messiah. That means you believe, because think and believe, they're kind of synonyms. You can plug one in, and that doesn't work in the Hebrew model. In the Hebrew model, if you believe, that means you're doing. It means you're showing fruit. And if you're not showing fruit, you don't believe. So, if we are his servants, then what are we doing to serve him? What have we done to serve him today? Or are we focused on being served? He says, which of you, if you have if you're Yahweh or you're Yeshua, and you have under shepherds, they're plowing or they're tending sheep, they're doing something in the field, when they come in, are you going to say, oh, sit down, relax, I'm going to serve you? Will he not rather say to him, prepare something for my supper, gird yourself and serve me until I have eaten and drunk, and then afterwards you will eat and drink? Verse 9, does he thank that servant because he did all the things that were commanded of him? Did he thank him for doing his job? I think not. And Yahweh works his servants hard. Verse 10, so likewise you, when you have done all those things which you are commanded, we're talking about all the things in the renewed covenant. We're talking about a single foundation of apostles and prophets. We're talking about a fivefold ministers all working together, submitting first to his spirit, then one to another in the spirit, so as to build a single family of man that can take care of his planet and his people and join together with Judah and bring Ishmael in during the millennium. Okay, when you have done all of that, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done only that which it was our duty to do. That's how we have more faith, is we become more humble. We become more obedient. We become more humble. We pay greater attention and care to what does Yeshua want. We pay attention to the face of our master. We ask him to show us, what would you like us to change about us? We're here to serve you and not the other way around. And that's the attitude he wants us to have. That's what builds more faith. And we're going to talk about Numbers, verse 11. Now it happened as he went to Jerusalem that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee, Shomron and Galil. Then as he entered a certain village, there met him 10 lepers, there's your census, who were lepers, who stood afar off. And they lifted up their voices and they said, Yeshua, Master, have mercy on us. Verse 14, so when he saw them, he said to them, go, show yourselves to the priests. And so it was that as they went, they were cleansed. Verse 15, and one of them, when he saw that he was healed, he returned and with a loud voice glorified Elohim and fell down on his face at his feet, giving thanks. And if this is a prophetic shadow picture or not, I'm not sure, but he was a Samaritan. Verse 17, so Yeshua answered and said, were there not 10 cleansed? So then where are the other 9? Were there not any found to return to give glory to Elohim except this foreigner, this outsider, this stranger, this Ephraimite perhaps? And he said to him, arise, go your way. Your faith has made you well. So, what good did a census do in this circumstance? You had 10, or you had the 9. They look left and right. No one's turning to go back to give Yeshua even thanks, let alone joining his program. So you had 1 acting alone, and it's hard for us. We're like sheep. We're a flock animal or a herd animal. We don't like to be alone. We like to be together with others. And Yahweh knows it's difficult. If we're going to serve him, we have to step out of our Christian comfort zones. The whole concept of a Christian comfort zone, it's like, did the apostles have those? Well, so where's the other 9? So verse 20, now when he was asked by the Pharisees, who are the ancestors of the Orthodox, same group of people, just changed their name in the Middle Ages. When asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of Elohim would come, he answered them and said, the kingdom, now careful here because there's different definitions. The kingdom of Elohim does not come with observation, nor will they say, look here or see there, for indeed the kingdom of Elohim is within you. Now, in context, the Pharisees, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a military leader to bring about the kingdom by force or subterfuge or however they're going to do it. Okay, Yeshua is saying, don't look for that. Okay, you're looking for the fruit. Okay, don't look like that. Okay, start inside. Okay, you want to find the kingdom of Elohim, you have to seek the kingdom in the spirit. You have to start inside. If you don't establish submission to the spirit and then submission one to another in the spirit, you will not see the kingdom of Elohim. Okay, you have to start inside. It has to be a spiritual transformation that will then manifest the fruits in the material. That's how it works. And we said we'd come to this about the kingdom of Israel. Notice in Maaseh or Acts chapter 1, starting in verse 6, so Yeshua is risen and all the disciples have come together and they're asking Yeshua, saying, Adon, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Okay, they were looking for a military leader back then also. Okay, are you going to restore the kingdom of Ephraim, the kingdom of Joseph, the northern kingdom of Israel? Are you going to restore it? And he says, it's not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father has put in his own authority. Rather, you're going to go be witnesses to me, of me, to the ends of the earth, in Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. So let's not focus on the material manifestations. Okay, let's focus on the spiritual, and then later we will see the material manifestation. And as we've already seen in Hosea, Judah and Joseph are going to get it together. And as we saw in Ezekiel, the very first thing that has to happen is the stick of Ephraim, the stick of Joseph has to be formed in the hand of Ephraim. Until we do that, first things first. First things first. But verse 22, Yeshua said to his disciples, the days will come when you desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, but you will not see it because he's not going to be here. He's going to be in his Father's house, adding on rooms for us to live. Okay, verse 23, and they will say to you, look here or look there. Here's the Mashiach. Here's Yeshua. Okay, do not go after them and do not follow them. Verse 24, for as the lightning that flashes out of one part of the heaven shines to the other part under the heaven, so also the Son of Man will be in his day. There's going to be people looking for a physical kingdom, looking for numbers, looking to take a big census so they can take pride in their numbers. And Yeshua's preaching against this. Verse 25. So that's one of the reasons why Yeshua, performing his role as a prophet, had to suffer many things and be rejected by that generation. He came in the prophetic role, also in the priestly role, and was rejected. Because why? Because we don't want to give up our Yetzer Hara. We don't want to give up our evil inclination. We don't want to submit to the Spirit. We want the kingdom of Elohim without submitting first to Elohim in the Spirit, and then also without submitting one to another in the Spirit. And this has been the whole problem with the Ephraimite movement all along, is there's very few people who want to submit. Very few people even know what it means to hear his voice, let alone submit to it, let alone hand him the steering wheel and the keys. But this is the very first thing we have to do. Don't pay attention to the census. Don't pay attention to the numbers. Pay attention to Yahweh, submit to his Spirit, and then submit one to another in the Spirit, and the family will begin to appear. So he says in verse 26, people aren't going to listen. They don't want to know. They're not interested. They have other things to do, other priorities. And that's why, verse 26, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be also when the Son of Man returns. The people were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying wives, they were giving in marriage, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. They were living their lives in the world. They still had even the concept of free time. Brother, if you still have the concept of free time, then you don't know what Elohim wants. You don't know what it is to be a servant. So when you submit in the Spirit, you say, Elohim, please you take control, and he will work you hard. That's how it goes. So praise Yah. So as it was also, verse 28, as it was also in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they lived their lives in the world. They had time for TV. They went to the water park. They hung out at the beach. They went hiking. They did this, they did that. They had fun. They played poker. They watched TV. They watched Netflix. They watched movies. A lot of road noise out there. But they did whatever they wanted, not putting Elohim first. So a lot of road noise out there. So, but on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. So what is he saying? He's saying, if we can just back up and imagine, what would it have been like if we had never fallen in Eden? What would it have been like? So we would have a single family governing ourselves together to listen to him and take care of his planet. That's what he designed us for. That's what he created us for. Why we don't want to do that? Why we don't want to submit first to his Spirit and then one to another in the Spirit? Why we have other things to do? Why we have T-ball? Why we have PTA meetings? Why we have political campaigns for Trump? Why do we have any of those things? Just because we're not listening in the Spirit, we're not submitting in the Spirit. And yet somehow we expect that we're going to magically enter the spiritual kingdom of heaven. And all this stuff is going to happen without our obedience. It's crazy. It's just completely crazy. So he says, verse 30, even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he who is on the housetop and his goods are down in the house, don't worry about your goods. Let him not come down and take his goods away. Likewise, the ones who's in the field, let him not turn back and worry about his goods. Let him not put goods first before Elohim. Let him put Elohim first. So Yeshua says, verse 32, remember Lot's wife. What about Lot's wife? Okay, he says, whoever seeks to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for Yeshua's sake will preserve it. Okay, well, what about Lot's wife? Why are we supposed to remember Lot's wife? Okay, so let's drop back to Bereshit or Genesis chapter 19, starting in verse 24. We're going to come back to verse 24. Then Yahweh rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yahweh out of the heavens. Okay, how many Yahwehs in that verse? You got one on earth and you got one in the heavens. We're going to see this again. We talk about Yeshua's nature and why the Trinity is wrong. Anyone else see two Yahwehs? Okay, verse 25. So he overthrew those cities, all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground, scorched earth. Verse 26. But Lot's wife looked back behind Lot. Maybe she's looking back at her goods. Maybe she's thinking about the family that stayed behind. But Lot's wife looked back behind Lot, and she became a pillar of salt. So either you're a member of the physical army or you're a member of the spiritual army. And whichever role Yahweh calls us to, that's the role we need to fulfill. That's the job that we need to do. And either we're in the service, we're in the host spiritually, or we're in the host temporally. But either way, we need to serve. Okay, Israel's even with both houses brought back together, Israel will still be a little tiny country. How are we supposed to rule the world with his rod of iron unless we work together exceptionally well, according to his principles, according to his ways? So do we have this kind of a spiritual wartime mentality, meaning we understand there's something to do? Or do we perhaps have a spiritual peacetime attitude? There's really nothing to do. We're just going to enjoy our lives in the world. We're going to ask Yahweh for what we want. Dear Yahweh, please give me more of the things that I want. And I want a big car, and I want a big house, and I want a big income, and I want lots of free time, and I want to do this with my life, and I want to do that with my life. But I want you to think of me as your servant, okay? Well, I don't know how. That's why there's so many Christians. It's because that's the Christian mindset, is we just live happy lives with lots of things and stuff. And we got that from the house of Esav. Okay? And if we still think about that, if that's still what we want, is we don't want to be Yahweh's servants. We want to be our own sovereign bosses. We want to be our own kings, and Yahweh's here to serve us. That's Esav. That's an Esavite attitude. We're still in the house of Esav. And that's not going to cut it. That's not going to work. That's considered idolatry, spiritual adultery. That's not service to Yahweh. That's service to Esav. It's Jude 3 all over again. Even though you're saved, it's still necessary to keep the original halakha. It's still necessary to imitate Yeshua. Yeshua, we know, kept the Torah perfectly. We also then should keep the Torah perfectly. And what is in the Torah that's worth keeping perfectly? We have two roles for two different kinds of armies. Either you're part of the temporal army, part of the host, or you're part of the spiritual army. Okay, and again, the spiritual is the more primary. First, you win the war. Well, first, you communicate with Yahweh. Yahweh wins the war for you in the spiritual, and then it manifests in the natural. That's how it really works. So what's our goal, brothers, sisters? We want to live a nice, happy life with lots of things and stuff and free time and paintings and fun time watching our TV shows, going to movies with friends, nice dinner parties, having a good time. You can do that if you're paying your tithes. But what are we really supposed to be doing with our lives? What do we really want to be found having done when we get to the day of the judgment? Okay, we want to serve Yahweh by investing our mina. We want to take our mina and do something with it. And if we're not doing anything with it, then we need to put it on investment with the bank, meaning we need to support someone who is doing something with it. Brothers and sisters, there is work of the tabernacle to do. The tabernacle of David has a priesthood. The priesthood needs the support. There is a job to do. The war must be won first in the spiritual, then Yahweh will manifest the blessings in the natural. That's how it works. If we're just seeking the blessings in the natural, we're not getting it. Okay, we have to seek to serve him. If we want to be his helper bride, don't we have to help him? Brothers and sisters, what are we doing for Yahweh today? How are we helping Yeshua get the Father sent Yeshua to build his kingdom for him. How are we helping Yeshua to do that? How are we helping the stick of Joseph in the hand of Ephraim to come together? Brothers and sisters, what have we done for Elohim? This week is Shabbat. We're taking a rest. We're getting refreshed. Are we hearing and obeying his voice today? Do we know what it means to hear his voice? And if not, are we listening to someone who does? Okay. What have we done to serve Elohim today? How have we helped the stick of Joseph come together in the hand of Ephraim? How have we helped build Yeshua's unified fivefold kingdom today, or at least this week? These are the questions we need to be praying about this Shabbat and every Shabbat. What are we doing for him? Are we living a parasitic lifestyle? We're just here for the blessings. We're not here to do any work. How many people want to have employees like that? If you were a boss, if you were a good shepherd, how many under shepherds would you like that they're only there for the blessings? Well, these are the questions we should pray about as we think about the two types of armies and Yeshua's role as the leader of the spiritual army. So I pray that you will all pray with me that we can all work together to help Yeshua get what he wants, which is what his Father wants, because that's what we will want to have been found doing in the day of judgment. Shabbat Shalom.